My parents thought I would babysit 6 kids all summer until I executed my master plan after they informed me at Sunday breakfast that I'd be watching my sister's 4 children plus my brother's 2, because family helps family, while they all went to work, and I had nothing better to do during my college break. They never mentioned payment, just handed me a schedule with 7 a.m., 6 p.m. shifts Monday through Friday for 12 weeks. And when I asked about compensation, my mother laughed and said, "You live here rent-free. That is your payment." I'm Ivy, 20 years old, and that Sunday morning I watched my mother slide the laminated schedule across the table with the same satisfied smile she wore when organizing church fundraisers. My father nodded approval while cutting his pancakes. Blair, my 28-year-old sister, was already texting on her phone, completely disengaged. Owen, 30 and perpetually convinced of his own importance, leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. Not one of them looked at me when they delivered this news. They simply expected compliance. 12 weeks? I repeated carefully, keeping my voice neutral. That's the entire summer. I was planning to take that marketing internship. My mother waved her hand dismissively. You can do internships anytime. Family comes first, Ivy. Besides, childcare would cost Blair and Owen thousands of dollars. You're saving them so much money. The irony of her statement, that my labor was worth thousands yet I deserved nothing, wasn't lost on me. But I said nothing. Not yet. Growing up as the youngest in our family meant I had spent my entire childhood watching Blair and Owen receive preferential treatment while I was expected to be grateful for whatever scraps remained. Blair got a brand new car for her 16th birthday. Owen's college tuition was paid in full. When my turn came, I received a used laptop and stern lectures about student loans building character. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout high school while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, earned a partial scholarship to State University, and still took out loans for the remainder. My parents attended maybe 3 of my school events total, always too busy with Blair's theater productions or Owen's baseball tournaments. Blair married young to a corporate attorney and immediately had 4 children in rapid succession. She worked part-time as a real estate agent, mostly because she enjoyed the social aspect and the excuse to hire interior designers. Owen worked in finance and had 2 children with his wife, who managed a boutique downtown. Both my siblings lived in expensive homes in the same neighborhood as our parents, while I shared a cramped apartment near campus with 2 roommates. The family geography meant frequent gatherings where I was always expected to help cook, clean, or entertain children while everyone else relaxed. The kids absolutely adore you, Blair added without looking up from her phone. They're always asking when Aunt Ivy is coming over. This was a lie. Blair's children were nightmares, spoiled, undisciplined, and accustomed to getting everything they demanded. Owen's kids weren't much better, though younger and therefore slightly less calculated in their chaos. I had witnessed enough family gatherings to know that 6 children ranging from ages 2 to 9 would create absolute pandemonium, especially without their parents present to maintain even minimal boundaries. What about swimming lessons, summer camps, activities? I asked. My mother shook her head firmly. Too expensive when you're already here. You can take them to the park. There's a playground right down the street. I glanced at my father, who had remained silent throughout this discussion. He met my eyes briefly before returning his attention to his breakfast, offering neither support nor objection. He had perfected the art of passive participation in family decisions, always deferring to my mother's pronouncements while maintaining plausible deniability. The schedule they handed me was color-coded and detailed down to 15-minute increments. Drop-offs would begin at 7 in the morning. Blair would bring her 4 kids, Owen his 2. I would be responsible for meals. They would provide groceries, but I would need to plan, prepare, and clean up after every breakfast, lunch, and snack. Naps needed to be coordinated, outdoor time scheduled, educational activities incorporated. The list of expectations covered 2 full pages. At the bottom, my mother had written in her neat cursive, "This is what family does for each other." I start my internship on June 1st. I tried again. I've already accepted the position. My mother's smile tightened. Then you'll need to contact them and explain that family obligations came up. I'm sure they'll understand. Blair finally looked up from her phone. Ivy, don't be selfish. Do you know how much we're saving by having you watch the kids? The childcare center wanted $400 per week per child. You're basically giving us a gift worth thousands. There it was again. The acknowledgement that my labor had significant monetary value, immediately followed by the expectation that I should provide it for free. I felt heat rising in my chest but kept my expression neutral. 20 years of being the family doormat had taught me that emotional reactions only resulted in accusations of being dramatic or ungrateful. "And what about payment?" I asked quietly. "If my work is worth thousands, shouldn't I receive something?" The silence that followed was heavy with judgment. My father shifted uncomfortably. Owen snorted with derision. Blair's eyebrows rose in exaggerated surprise. But my mother's reaction was the most telling. Her face hardened into the expression I knew meant the discussion was over. "Payment?" she repeated coldly. "You live in this house rent-free every summer and holiday. You eat our food, use our utilities. Your father and I have provided for you your entire life. And this is how you respond? By demanding money to help your own family?" "I'm 20 years old," I said carefully. "I've been working since I was 15. I pay my own rent during the school year, my own groceries, my own expenses. Coming home for summer break doesn't mean I'm living here rent-free. It means I'm between leases." My mother stood abruptly, gathering dishes with sharp, angry movements. "If you feel that way, perhaps you should find somewhere else to stay this summer. I'm sure your siblings can find other childcare arrangements, though it will cost them significantly more money during an already expensive time." The threat was clear: refuse to comply, and I would be cut off entirely. I had seen this pattern before, though never directed at me with such intensity. When Owen briefly dated someone my parents didn't approve of, they threatened to withdraw financial support until he ended the relationship. When Blair wanted to work full-time instead of part-time, they guilted her into reducing her hours by claiming she was neglecting her children. Control through obligation and manufactured guilt was their specialty. I looked at my siblings, hoping for even minimal support. Blair had returned to her phone. Owen was checking his watch, already mentally moving on to his next appointment. Neither of them saw anything wrong with this arrangement because it benefited them directly. Why would they object when their childcare problem was being solved at zero cost? "I need to think about it," I said finally, standing from the table. My mother's laugh was bitter. "Think about it? This isn't a negotiation, Ivy. This is what's happening. The children start arriving Monday at 7. I retreated to my childhood bedroom, unchanged since high school, still decorated with posters and trophies from a teenage girl who had believed hard work and good behavior would eventually earn her family's respect. That naive optimism felt distant now, replaced by a cold clarity that had been building for years. I pulled out my laptop and began researching. State labor laws regarding childcare, requirements for in-home daycare operations, licensing regulations, insurance requirements, tax implications of providing childcare services. I took meticulous notes, organizing information into categories. Then I opened a new document and began calculating. 6 children, 55 hours per week, 12 weeks total. If the going rate was $400 per week per child, that meant my labor was worth $2,400 weekly, or $28,800 for the summer. Even if I generously discounted my services to half the commercial rate, I was being asked to provide $14,400 worth of unpaid labor. The numbers stared back at me from the screen, quantifying the exploitation in terms that couldn't be dismissed as emotional exaggeration. My phone buzzed with a text from Blair. "Thanks for being a team player. The kids are so excited." There was no acknowledgement of my concerns, no recognition that she was benefiting enormously from my unpaid labor. Just cheerful assumption of my compliance. Owen sent a similar message. "Appreciate you helping out. This saves us a fortune." Neither offered payment. Neither suggested splitting the cost of groceries I would be buying and preparing. Neither seemed to consider that I had my own life, my own plans, my own financial needs. I spent that Sunday afternoon making phone calls. First to my academic advisor, confirming my scholarship status and financial aid package. Then to my internship coordinator, apologizing profusely while explaining a family emergency required me to defer my start date. The disappointment in her voice was evident, but she agreed to hold my position until late August if possible. Next, I called my roommates, negotiating to sublet my room for the summer to offset rent I couldn't afford to pay, while providing free childcare. As the sun set, I sat at my old desk and made a decision. My family expected compliance, expected me to fold under pressure like I always had. They assumed I would prioritize their comfort over my own well-being, would accept their gaslighting about gratitude and family obligation. They were wrong. I wouldn't refuse outright. That would result in being cut off entirely, potentially impacting my ability to finish college. But I also wouldn't be their unpaid servant any longer. I drafted an email to my parents with Blair and Owen CC'd. The tone was professional, detached, exactly what I had learned in my business communications class. Thank you for trusting me with childcare responsibilities this summer. To ensure we have clear expectations, I've attached a detailed agreement outlining schedule, responsibilities, compensation, and terms. Please review and let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to discuss any concerns before we finalize arrangements. The attachment was a 5-page document I had spent hours perfecting. It outlined every responsibility they had mentioned, plus numerous others they had forgotten: emergency procedures, discipline policies, meal planning, educational activities, transportation. And at the end, in professional language lifted directly from childcare licensing requirements, was a rate structure: $15 per hour per child, totaling $90 per hour for 6 children. Calculated weekly, this came to $4,950. For 12 weeks, $59,400. The numbers were deliberately astronomical, designed to shock. But they were also completely justified by commercial childcare rates. I wasn't actually expecting payment. What I was doing was creating a paper trail, documenting the value of my labor in terms that couldn't be denied. And I was setting a trap. My family would respond with outrage, would refuse to pay, would double down on their expectation of free labor. And when they did, I would have everything I needed. I attached 2 additional documents. First, a liability waiver acknowledging that operating an unlicensed childcare facility violated state regulations, putting both the provider and the parents at legal and financial risk. Second, a tax form noting that childcare services worth over $600 annually must be reported as income, meaning my parents would need to either pay me legitimately or commit tax fraud. I didn't expect them to read either document carefully. I was counting on them to be so enraged by the compensation request that they would miss the carefully planted legal landmines. My finger hovered over the send button for several long moments. Once I sent this, there would be no going back. My family would be furious. They would accuse me of ingratitude, selfishness, greed. They would tell extended family I was causing problems, would paint me as the villain in their narrative. But I was done being their convenient doormat, done prioritizing their comfort over my dignity, done accepting scraps while they demanded my everything. I clicked send. The email disappeared from my outbox with a soft whoosh, and then I waited. The response came faster than I expected. 18 minutes later, my phone erupted with notification sounds, text messages from my mother, Blair, and Owen, all expressing varying degrees of outrage. My mother's message was the longest, a wall of text about disrespect and entitlement and forgetting where I came from. Blair's was shorter, but equally accusatory. I can't believe you're trying to extort money from your own family. Owen's was predictably blunt. This is ridiculous. You're being a greedy brat. None of them mentioned the liability waiver or tax forms. None of them acknowledged the legal implications of what they were asking me to do. They focused entirely on the audacity of me requesting payment, as though my labor had no value unless I willingly gave it away. Perfect. I had set the trap, and they had walked directly into it, so focused on their sense of entitlement that they missed the bigger picture entirely. My father called an hour later. His voice was tired, disappointed. Ivy, this isn't like you. Your mother is very upset. Can't we discuss this reasonably? I kept my tone calm, professional. I sent a detailed document outlining reasonable expectations and compensation. If there are specific points you'd like to discuss, I'm happy to negotiate. But I won't provide 55 hours of skilled labor weekly for 12 weeks without fair compensation. He sighed heavily. You're part of this family. We don't charge each other for help. Dad, when Owen needed money for his business startup, you and Mom gave him $15,000. When Blair needed help with her down payment, you gave her $20,000. When I asked for help with college costs, you told me loans build character. so I'm not sure family help is actually free. It just seems to be free when I'm the one providing it. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "That's not fair, Ivy." Maybe not, but it was true, and I was done pretending otherwise. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a storm I had watched gathering on the horizon. At 6:30, I received a text from my mother. "The children will be here at 7 as planned. We'll discuss your ridiculous demands later." No acknowledgement of my concerns, no actual discussion of terms, just the assumption that I would comply despite everything. I dressed carefully in clothes I didn't mind getting destroyed, pulled my hair into a tight ponytail, and set up my phone on the kitchen counter with the camera positioned to capture the entire room. Blair arrived first at 6:55, her SUV pulling into the driveway with practiced precision. She herded her 4 children through the door without making eye contact, their backpacks and lunchboxes creating an immediate obstacle course in the entryway. Madison needs her inhaler at noon. Jackson can't have dairy. Olivia is going through a phase where she only eats chicken nuggets, and Tyler will tell you he's allergic to vegetables, but he's lying. She rattled off while checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "I'll be back by 6, maybe 6:30. Depends on showings." "We need to discuss payment," I said calmly. Blair's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Payment? Ivy, you're not serious about that insane email. Just watch the kids. I'm already late." She was gone before I could respond, her expensive perfume lingering in the air like an accusation. The children immediately scattered throughout the house, their voices rising in volume as they claimed territory. I didn't move to intercept them. I simply pressed record on my phone and waited. Owen arrived at 7:05 with his 2 children, both under 5, and already crying. Emma didn't sleep well, so she's cranky. Noah will need a nap by 9. Their routines are in this binder. He thrust a 3-inch thick binder at me, its tabs color-coded and labeled with military precision. My wife spent hours putting this together. Follow it exactly. I accepted the binder without opening it. About the compensation agreement I sent, Owen cut me off with an impatient gesture. "Not doing this right now. Some of us have real jobs to get to." Real jobs. The phrase hung between us, a perfect encapsulation of how my family viewed my work, my education, my time. Owen's financial analyst position was a real job, worthy of respect and compensation. My years of academic achievement, my double major in business and psychology, my pending internship, none of that qualified as real in their estimation. I was just Ivy, the youngest, the convenient one, the one who should be grateful for the privilege of serving them. By 7:15, all 6 children were in the house, and both my siblings had vanished to their real jobs. The chaos was immediate and overwhelming. Tyler, age 9, decided to test boundaries by attempting to turn on every electronic device in the house simultaneously. Madison, age 7, began crying because she wanted her mother. Jackson, age 5, opened the refrigerator and started removing items systematically, examining each one before abandoning it on the floor. Olivia, age 6, found markers and began decorating the hallway wall with enthusiastic scribbles. Emma, age 4, continued her morning meltdown with impressive stamina. Noah, age 2, simply stood in the middle of the living room and screamed. I stood in the doorway and documented everything. My phone recorded Madison's tears, Jackson's refrigerator excavation, Olivia's artwork, the general pandemonium. I made no attempt to intervene, to establish control, to redirect behavior. I simply let the natural consequences of my family's assumptions play out in real time. This wasn't neglect. I was monitoring for actual safety issues, but it also wasn't the professional childcare service they expected to receive for free. At 7:45, my mother arrived unannounced. She had a key and let herself in, likely expecting to find me competently managing the situation. Instead, she found Tyler watching inappropriate YouTube videos on the television at maximum volume, Madison still crying, Jackson surrounded by the entire contents of the refrigerator, Olivia adding her 10th layer of marker to the wall, Emma shrieking about wanting her daddy, and Noah methodically throwing books from the shelf one by one. Ivy! My mother's voice cut through the chaos like a whip crack. What on earth are you doing? Why aren't you watching them? I turned from where I had been documenting the scene. I'm observing, As outlined in the care agreement I sent, proper supervision requires appropriate compensation. Since we haven't finalized those terms, I'm providing observation only. Everyone is safe, which is the legal minimum requirement for supervision. Her face flushed dark red. This is not what we agreed to. I kept my voice pleasant, professional. Actually, we haven't agreed to anything yet. I sent a detailed proposal. You responded with texts demanding I provide services without compensation or contract. That's not an agreement, that's an ultimatum. She stepped closer, her voice lowering to the dangerous register I remembered from childhood. Stop this nonsense right now and do what you're supposed to do. What I'm supposed to do? I repeated softly. Could you define that exactly? Because from my perspective, what I'm supposed to do is complete my education, pursue career opportunities, and make decisions that support my future. What you're asking me to do is sacrifice 12 weeks of potential income and professional development to provide services you've determined I should offer for free. Those aren't the same thing. My mother's jaw tightened. She turned to the children, her voice transforming into the sugary sweetness she used with grandchildren. Madison, sweetheart, why are you crying? Come to Grandma. Madison ran to her immediately, burying her face in my mother's stomach. Aunt Ivy isn't watching us properly. She's just standing there with her phone. My mother's eyes met mine over Madison's head, triumphant. See? You're upsetting them. I'm documenting the reality of what unsupervised children do, I corrected. This is what happens when 6 children with different needs, different routines, and minimal boundaries are placed in an environment without adequate staffing or structure. Professional childcare facilities maintain ratios of 1 adult per 4 children for this exact reason. You're expecting me to maintain 1 to 6, which exceeds recommended safety guidelines. My mother's expression shifted to confusion, then irritation. Safety guidelines? Ivy, these are family children, not a daycare center. I smiled pleasantly. Actually, according to state regulations, any facility providing care for more than 3 unrelated children requires licensing. While these children are related to me, they aren't siblings to each other, which creates a gray area. More importantly, the moment compensation is involved, even implicit compensation like rent-free housing, which you've cited as payment, this situation falls under child care service regulations. That includes liability insurance, safety protocols, and proper adult-to-child ratios. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. My mother stared at me as though I had transformed into something unrecognizable, which, in a way, I had. The compliant youngest daughter who absorbed criticism and accepted scraps had been replaced by someone who understood contracts, regulations, and the actual value of her labor. "Are you threatening to report us?" she asked finally, her voice barely controlled. "I'm educating you about the legal realities of what you're asking me to do," I replied calmly. "Operating an unlicensed child care facility carries significant penalties, fines, legal action, potential impact on your professional reputation. I included all of this in the documentation I sent. Did you read it?" Her expression confirmed what I had suspected. She had been so enraged by the compensation request that she had dismissed everything else as irrelevant. My mother spent the next 15 minutes attempting damage control, separating children, cleaning up the refrigerator contents, wiping marker from the wall with limited success. I continued documenting, my phone capturing her obvious frustration and the children's continued chaos. Finally, she turned to me with forced calm. "We need to have a family meeting tonight, all of us, 6 o'clock. Be there." It wasn't a request. "I'll attend," I agreed. "Should I bring copies of the care agreement for everyone to review?" Her nostrils flared. "Bring whatever you want. But this stops today, Ivy. You're being selfish and ridiculous, and it ends now." She gathered her purse and left, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. The door slammed behind her, rattling the windows. The children, momentarily subdued by her presence, immediately resumed their chaos. I looked at my phone's recording timestamp. 53 minutes of documented pandemonium. Perfect. I saved the video file with detailed notes about timing, behaviors, and safety concerns. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting a second document, this one outlining observed care challenges and recommended solutions. Professional language, clinical observations. the kind of report a licensed childcare consultant might produce after an initial assessment. By noon, I had fed the children basic meals from the groceries Blair and Owen had provided, which were wholly inadequate for 6 children's nutritional needs. Owen's binder proved worthless. His children's routines were impossible to maintain when combined with Blair's children's competing needs. Emma refused to nap despite Owen's insistence she needed one at 9. Noah threw his food across the room with impressive accuracy. Tyler found my old gaming console and disappeared into a virtual world. The afternoon deteriorated further. At 3 o'clock, my father called. "Your mother is very upset," he said without preamble. "She says you're deliberately causing problems." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Jackson attempt to feed goldfish crackers to the actual fish in my old aquarium. I'm highlighting problems that already exist. 6 children with different needs, different routines, conflicting dietary restrictions, and behavioral challenges cannot be adequately supervised by a single untrained person for 11 hours daily. That's not me causing problems. That's reality asserting itself. "Ivy, please." His voice carried a weariness I hadn't heard before. "Can't you just help out for the summer? Do this one thing for your family?" The familiar guilt trip felt different now, transparent in its manipulation. "Dad, if my help is valuable enough that losing it would cost Blair and Owen thousands of dollars, why isn't it valuable enough to compensate? Why is my labor only worth something when I'm giving it away?" He had no answer for that. The conversation ended with him promising to see me at the 6 o'clock meeting, his tone suggesting he anticipated an unpleasant confrontation. I spent the remaining hours until parent pickup continuing my documentation. Every tantrum, every safety concern, every moment where adequate supervision proved impossible with current resources. The video files would prove invaluable later. Blair arrived at 6:20, irritated that I had texted her asking about pickup time. "I told you 6, maybe 6:30, she snapped while gathering her children's scattered belongings. "How did today go?" I handed her a printed summary. Documented behaviors, food consumed, activities attempted, safety concerns observed. She glanced at it briefly before crumpling it into her purse. "They're kids, Ivy. They're supposed to be energetic." Jackson opened the back door 4 times today and wandered into the yard unsupervised before I noticed, I said flatly. "Madison had an asthma episode and I couldn't find her inhaler because you didn't label which bag it was in. Tyler accessed adult content on YouTube before I could implement parental controls. Olivia drew on the walls with permanent markers. These aren't energy issues, these are safety and supervision issues." Blair's expression hardened. "Are you saying I'm a bad mother?" "I'm saying 6 children require more supervision than one person can safely provide," I corrected. "This is why professional facilities maintain strict ratios." She grabbed Madison's hand roughly. "We'll discuss this at the family meeting. Come on, kids, let's go." They departed in a whirlwind of accusations that I had let them run wild, that I wasn't trying hard enough, that family was supposed to support each other. Owen's pickup at 6:40 followed a similar pattern, defensive parents unwilling to acknowledge the impossibility of what they were demanding. The family meeting at my parents' house had the atmosphere of a tribunal. My mother sat at the head of the dining table, flanked by my father on one side and my siblings on the other. I took the seat across from them, alone, my laptop and folder of documentation positioned in front of me like a shield. "Let's make this simple," my mother began. "You're going to apologize for your behavior today, agree to watch the children properly, and stop this ridiculous demand for payment." I opened my laptop. "Before we begin, I want everyone to watch something." I turned the screen to face them and played the morning footage. The chaos, the safety concerns, Madison's distress, the general pandemonium. 3 minutes of unedited reality. My mother's face paled. Blair shifted uncomfortably. Owen's jaw clenched. "This is what you're asking me to manage alone, for 11 hours daily, for 12 weeks, without compensation or support." "You let them behave that way on purpose," Blair accused. "You wanted them to act out so you could make us look bad." I kept my voice level. I provided the supervision level appropriate for unpaid, uncompensated observation. If you want professional childcare services, meal planning, educational activities, behavioral management, emergency response that requires fair compensation and proper resources. You can't demand premium services while treating my labor as worthless. My father cleared his throat. What exactly do you want, Ivy? I pulled out printed copies of my revised proposal. Option 1. You pay me $15 per hour per child, which totals $59,400 for the summer, and I provide full professional care. Option 2. You find alternative childcare and stop pretending family obligation means free labor. Option 3. You acknowledge the situation is exploitative and we negotiate reasonable terms that respect everyone's needs. The silence that followed was volcanic. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice shaking with rage. You ungrateful, selfish girl. After everything we've done for you. After all the sacrifices we've made. I met her eyes steadily. What sacrifices exactly? You paid Owen's college tuition and gave Blair down payment money while telling me loans build character. You attend their important events while missing mine. You expect me to provide services worth thousands of dollars while calling me greedy for asking fair compensation. So please, explain what sacrifices you've made for me specifically. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Get out. If you can't appreciate your family, if money is more important than blood, then leave. You're not welcome here. The finality in her voice should have scared me. Instead, I felt oddly calm. I had spent 20 years trying to earn their approval, their recognition, their basic respect. I was done. I gathered my materials and stood. I'll pack my things tonight and be gone by morning. You'll need to find childcare by Wednesday at the latest. Most facilities require at least 48 hours notice for new enrollments. Blair's voice stopped me at the door. You're really going to abandon us? Abandon your family over money? I turned back slowly. No. You abandoned me when you decided my time, my labor, and my future were worth nothing. I'm just finally accepting that reality. The drive back to my parents' house to collect my belongings took 15 minutes. Packing everything I owned into my car took 2 hours. I worked methodically, removing every trace of my presence from the bedroom that had never really felt like mine. Clothes, books, the laptop they hadn't helped pay for, the phone I had purchased myself, every possession I had earned through my own work. I left behind the participation trophies from activities they rarely attended, the academic awards they barely acknowledged, the childhood photographs where I was always slightly out of frame. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from extended family who my mother had clearly contacted, all expressing disappointment in my selfishness. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my character. Aunts and uncles weighed in about respect and gratitude. The family narrative was being written in real time, and I was cast as the villain. I blocked each number methodically. Their approval had never protected me before. Their disapproval wouldn't destroy me now. By midnight, my car was packed and I was driving toward campus. My roommates had agreed to let me return early, suspending the sublet arrangement. The summer stretched ahead, uncertain and financially challenging, but free from the weight of family expectation. As city lights gave way to highway darkness, I felt something unfamiliar. Not happiness exactly, but the absence of constant diminishment. For the first time in 20 years, I had chosen myself. And that choice, regardless of what came next, felt like breathing after years of suffocation. The apartment I returned to was smaller than I remembered, the walls thin enough to hear every sound from neighboring units. My roommates, Jenna and Marcus, were surprisingly understanding when I explained the situation in carefully edited terms. Family drama covered multitudes without requiring detailed explanation. They helped me unload my car, offered sympathy, and tactfully avoided questions about why I was returning 2 weeks into summer break. The first morning back, I woke at 6:30 out of habit, my body clock still programmed for childcare duties I was no longer performing. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, processing the enormity of what I had done. I had walked away from my entire family over a principle, burned bridges that couldn't be rebuilt. The practical implications were staggering. No safety net, no parental support, potentially damaged relationships with extended family who only knew my mother's version of events. My phone had 37 missed calls and dozens of text messages, none of which I felt prepared to answer. I silenced the device and focused on what I could control. First priority, income. The marketing internship I had deferred wouldn't start for another 10 weeks, assuming they still held the position for me. I needed money now for rent, groceries, the student loans whose payments would resume in the fall. I pulled up job search sites and began applying everywhere: retail, restaurants, office temp work, anything offering immediate employment. By noon, I had submitted applications to 17 positions. By evening, 2 had responded requesting interviews. A coffee shop near campus needed someone for opening shifts starting at 5 in the morning. A catering company was hiring servers for weekend events. Neither paid well, but both offered immediate start dates and cash tips. I accepted both interview times, aware that I was constructing a schedule that would leave me chronically exhausted but financially solvent. The coffee shop interview the next morning was straightforward. The manager, a tired-looking woman named Sarah, barely glanced at my resume before asking if I could handle difficult customers in early mornings. I just walked away from providing free childcare for 6 kids to family members who thought they were entitled to my labor, I said. Difficult customers and early mornings sound peaceful by comparison. She laughed, surprised. You're hired. Be here tomorrow at 4:30 for training. The catering company interview that afternoon was more formal but equally desperate for staff. They needed servers for a corporate event that Friday. 12-hour shift, formal attire required, $200 plus tips. I agreed immediately, already calculating that 3 catering shifts per month plus coffee shop wages would cover my basic expenses. It wasn't the career-building summer I had planned, but it was survival on my own terms. Wednesday morning at the coffee shop, I learned that opening shifts meant arriving in darkness to prep before the morning rush. The work was repetitive: brewing coffee, restocking pastries, processing orders with mechanical efficiency. But there was something meditative about the routine, the lack of emotional manipulation, the straightforward transaction of labor for wages. Customers who were rude could be handled with professional courtesy and forgotten. No one expected me to accept poor treatment because we shared DNA. My mother called during my lunch break. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with detached curiosity to her message. Her voice oscillated between anger and manipulation, accusations of abandonment, followed by tearful pleas about family bonds, concluding with thinly veiled threats about my college fund access. That last part made me laugh bitterly. There was no college fund. There never had been. She was threatening to withdraw support that had never existed. I returned her call from a quiet corner of the coffee shop, my voice carefully neutral. I received your message. To clarify, you haven't contributed to my college expenses. I pay tuition through scholarships and loans. I pay rent through part-time work. I buy my own groceries, my own clothes, my own necessities. So when you threaten to cut me off, you're threatening to stop providing things you never provided. Silence. Then coldly. What about health insurance? It was a valid point. I was still on their family plan. I'll transition to the student health plan when the semester starts, I said. Until then, I'll be careful not to get sick. More silence. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to the martyred tone that always preceded guilt trips. Your father is very hurt. Your siblings are struggling to find childcare. The children keep asking when Aunt Ivy is coming back. The children will adjust, I replied. Blair and Owen will find licensed facilities with proper staffing ratios and trained professionals. Everyone will survive without my unpaid labor. My mother's breath hitched. How did you become so cold, so calculating? This isn't the daughter we raised. I thought about that for a long moment. You're right. The daughter you raised would have said yes to the childcare demand, would have swallowed her resentment, would have prioritized your comfort over her own well-being. You raised someone easy to exploit. Fortunately, I've been unlearning those lessons. She hung up without responding. I stared at the phone for several minutes, waiting for the guilt to arrive, for the familiar weight of disappointing my parents. It didn't come. Instead, I felt oddly light, as though cutting the call had severed something more substantial than just a phone connection. I returned to work, made $75 in tips during the afternoon rush, and went home feeling like I had won something important. The catering shift that Friday was brutally long but surprisingly lucrative. The corporate event was for a pharmaceutical company celebrating some product launch, which meant open bars and generous tipping. I spent 12 hours in formal attire, carrying trays, refilling drinks, clearing tables. My feet ached and my face hurt from maintaining professional pleasantness, but I walked away with $340 including tips, more than I had ever made in a single day. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me accept. "Is this Ivy?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Diane Richardson from the marketing internship program. I wanted to reach out personally about your situation." My stomach dropped. They were calling to rescind the position. "I understand if the internship is no longer available," I said quickly. "The family emergency I mentioned, it's complicated." "Actually," Diane interrupted gently, "I'm calling because something unexpected opened up. Our summer program coordinator resigned yesterday. Personal circumstances. The position is paid $15 per hour, 30 hours weekly, and begins Monday. The work involves exactly what you'd be doing in your internship, plus administrative coordination. Would you be interested?" I stopped walking, certain I had misheard. "Paid? 30 hours? Starting Monday?" "Your professors speak very highly of you," she continued. "And frankly, your email about needing to defer showed more professionalism than many entry-level candidates demonstrate. We appreciate reliability. So, are you interested?" I said yes immediately, multiple times, probably too enthusiastically. She laughed and promised to send the employment paperwork that evening. The call ended, and I stood on the sidewalk, stunned by the sudden reversal of fortune. $450 weekly from the internship coordinator position. Coffee shop shifts 3 mornings per week, adding another $200. Weekend catering, adding $300 monthly. I calculated quickly, enough for rent, groceries, loan payments, and modest savings. I wouldn't be wealthy, but I would be stable, independent, proving to myself that I could survive without family support. The relief was dizzying. That weekend, I reorganized my entire life around this new schedule. Coffee shop shifts Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4:30 to 9. Internship coordinator position, Monday through Friday, 9:30 to 3:30. Catering available weekends as needed. It was aggressive, leaving little room for rest or social life, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned would result from my labor, my choices, my terms. No one would call it rent payment or suggest I should be grateful for the privilege of working without compensation. Blair called Sunday afternoon. "The childcare center wants $800 per week for 4 kids, she said without preamble. Plus, they have weird holiday schedules and they close if any staff calls in sick. It's completely unreasonable." I kept my voice neutral. "That's the market rate for licensed professional care. They have insurance, trained staff, proper safety protocols. All the things you expected me to provide for free." "We can't afford $800 per week," she continued, frustration evident. "Owen's paying $600 for his 2 kids. That's $1,400 weekly, almost $6,000 per month, just for childcare. You could have saved us so much money." The manipulation was transparent, making their financial problems into my moral failure. "I could have provided labor worth thousands of dollars," I corrected. "You chose to value that labor at 0. Now you're paying market rate. Those are the consequences of your choice." "You're punishing the children." Blair tried a different angle. "They don't understand why you abandoned them." Anger flared hot and sudden. "I didn't abandon them. I declined to provide 11 hours of daily childcare for 6 kids without compensation or support. Those aren't the same thing. And if they're confused, maybe explain to them that Aunt Ivy has her own life, her own career, her own value beyond being your convenient free labor." Blair's voice hardened. "You've changed. You used to care about family." I almost laughed. "I still care about family. I just realized that caring shouldn't mean accepting exploitation. If you truly valued family, you would have offered fair compensation or at minimum acknowledged the value of what you were asking. Instead, you expected me to sacrifice my summer, my income, my career opportunities, because you decided family means unlimited access to my unpaid labor." She hung up. My hands were shaking with residual adrenaline. Setting boundaries with family was supposed to get easier with practice, but each confrontation still left me rattled. I reminded myself that their anger was proof I had made the right choice. Exploitative people always become furious when their victims stop cooperating. Their outrage was not evidence of my wrongdoing. It was confirmation that I had disrupted a system designed to benefit them at my expense. Monday morning, I started the internship coordinator position. Diane Richardson welcomed me warmly, introduced me to the team, and outlined responsibilities that aligned perfectly with my business degree focus. Event planning, communication coordination, scheduling, budget tracking, exactly the professional experience I needed. The other interns were friendly, the work engaging, the environment respectful. No one expected me to work for free. No one suggested I should be grateful for the opportunity to provide uncompensated labor. During lunch break the first day, I checked my phone and found another voicemail from my father. His message was different from my mother's emotional manipulation, quieter, more measured, but equally disappointing. Your mother showed me the documents you created. I have to admit, Ivy, the legalistic approach to family relationships is concerning. We're not a business contract. We're people who love each other. Can't you see that this obsession with fair compensation is damaging real relationships? I didn't call him back immediately. Instead, I pulled up the file I had been compiling since leaving, a detailed record of every financial transaction my parents had made for Blair and Owen versus what they had provided me. Owen's $15,000 business loan that was never repaid. Blair's $20,000 down payment gift. Their paid college tuitions. The new cars. The help with moving expenses. The countless other ways my parents had demonstrated love through financial support. Then I listed what they had given me. A used laptop for high school graduation, $200 for my 19th birthday, criticism about my spending habits when I asked for help with textbook costs. The disparity was stark, undeniable, the quantified proof of differential treatment I had felt my entire life but never articulated clearly. I saved the document as Family Investment Analysis and returned to work, pushing away the complicated feelings that threatened to undermine my newfound stability. By the end of my first week at the internship, I had settled into a rhythm. Early mornings at the coffee shop, coordinating intern activities through afternoon, occasional evening catering shift, collapse into bed exhausted but satisfied. Jenna commented that I looked different, lighter somehow despite the obviously demanding schedule. "You're not carrying that tense thing anymore," she observed, "like you've been expecting someone to yell at you." She wasn't wrong. I had spent 20 years in a state of hypervigilance, constantly monitoring my parents' moods, anticipating my siblings' needs, trying to prevent the criticism that came regardless of my efforts. Living without that pressure was transformative. If I worked hard and performed well at my jobs, I was valued. If I made mistakes, they were correctable without moral judgment. The absence of emotional manipulation created space for something I hadn't experienced before. Simple competence, without attached shame. The second week, my mother tried a different tactic. She appeared at the coffee shop during my opening shift, dressed impeccably despite the 5:30 morning hour. I was wiping down tables when she approached, her expression carefully composed. "We need to talk," she announced. "Somewhere private." I gestured to the empty shop. "This is as private as it gets until the morning rush. I have 7 minutes before prep work continues." She sat at the table I had just cleaned, looking around with barely disguised distaste. "This is what you chose? Serving coffee at dawn instead of helping your family?" I remained standing, creating physical distance. "This is what I chose. A job where my labor is compensated fairly and my time is respected. If you came to change my mind about the childcare situation, you're wasting your time. I came to tell you that your sister is having a difficult time," my mother said, shifting tactics. "The childcare situation is straining her marriage. Blair and her husband are fighting about money constantly. The children are acting out because of the disruption in their routines. All of this could have been avoided if you had just..." I held up a hand. "If I had just provided free labor worth $6,000 monthly so Blair could avoid the natural consequences of her reproductive choices? That's not my responsibility." My mother's carefully maintained composure cracked. "How dare you talk about your nieces and nephews that way? They're family, not consequences." I met her eyes steadily. "They're Blair's children, not mine. She decided to have 4 kids. She's responsible for arranging their care, not me. If she can't afford adequate childcare, maybe she and her husband need to adjust their lifestyle. That's called personal responsibility. something you've always claimed to value. We raised you better than this, she said coldly. Raised you to value family, to support each other, to make sacrifices when necessary. I laughed without humor. You raised me to accept unequal treatment and call it family loyalty. You taught me that my needs don't matter, my time has no value, and I should be grateful for scraps while my siblings receive feasts. You raised me to be convenient. I'm choosing to be valued instead. She stood abruptly. When you come crawling back, and you will, because eventually you'll need something from us, remember this conversation. Remember how you chose pride over family. She left without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Several early morning customers had entered during our confrontation, their expressions carefully neutral as they pretended not to have heard every word. I returned to work, my hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Sarah, the coffee shop manager, found me during my break. That was your mother? I nodded. She shook her head slowly. My family tried something similar when I was your age. Wanted me to loan them money I didn't have. Told me I was selfish when I refused. Took me years to realize that people who really love you don't treat your boundaries like betrayals. Her words settled something that had been unsettled. I wasn't alone in this experience. I wasn't uniquely terrible for prioritizing my own well-being. The internship coordinator role evolved into something unexpectedly fulfilling. Diane trusted me with increasing responsibility, letting me design orientation materials, coordinate with different departments, even present at team meetings. The other interns treated me as a peer despite my administrative role, asking advice about navigating professional environments and managing competing obligations. I was building skills that would serve me long after the summer ended. Owen sent an email rather than calling, probably hoping written communication would be easier to ignore. The message was long, detailed, outlining the financial strain my decision had created for both families. He included spreadsheets showing childcare costs versus household budgets, with highlighted sections demonstrating the gap. As you can see, he wrote, what you're costing us is more than just money. It's security, stability, and peace of mind. I hope you reconsider your position. I responded with my own spreadsheet. Column 1, hours I would have provided, 660 total for summer. Column 2, market rate per hour per child, $15. Column 3, total value of labor requested, $59,400. Column 4, compensation offered, $0. Column 5, percentage of value I was expected to provide for free, 100%. As you can see, I wrote, mirroring his language, what I'm costing you is the amount you would have saved by exploiting my labor. The security, stability, and peace of mind you mention were always going to cost someone. You just expected that someone to be me. He didn't respond. Blair forwarded the email chain to our parents with commentary about my aggressive and hostile communication style. My mother replied, all suggesting I needed therapy to address my obvious issues with family relationships. I removed myself from the email chain and blocked their addresses. They could construct whatever narrative they wanted in their private forum. I was no longer participating in the fiction that their exploitation represented family love. 6 weeks into summer, I had established a life that functioned smoothly without my family's presence. Morning shifts at the coffee shop had become meditative, the routine of brewing and serving creating a rhythm I found oddly soothing. The internship coordinator position was exceeding expectations. Diane had already mentioned the possibility of extending the role into the fall semester, working around my class schedule. Weekend catering gigs provided extra income and unexpected networking opportunities. Then everything accelerated in ways I hadn't anticipated. It started with a message from the State Department of Labor and Industry forwarded to my student email. The subject line read, "Inquiry regarding unlicensed childcare operation." My stomach dropped as I opened the attachment. Someone had filed a formal complaint about an unlicensed in-home childcare facility operating at my parents' address, citing safety violations, inadequate supervision ratios, and failure to maintain required insurance and certifications. The complaint was thorough, professional, accompanied by photographic evidence and detailed documentation. I recognized my own phone footage from that chaotic Monday morning. The video I had recorded showing 6 children in various states of chaos, safety hazards visible in every frame. Someone had submitted my evidence, but I had never filed any complaint. The sender email listed on the form was anonymous, routed through a privacy service. I called my parents' house from my apartment, stepping onto the balcony for privacy. My mother answered on the first ring, her voice tight with barely contained fury. "I assume you've heard," she said without greeting, "that your little revenge plan has succeeded, that you've managed to make everything impossibly worse out of pure spite." I kept my voice calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play innocent," she snapped. "The State Labor Department received a formal complaint about illegal childcare operations. They're threatening fines, investigations, potential legal action. They have video evidence, the same footage you recorded. So explain to me how you're not responsible." I processed this information carefully. I never filed a complaint with any government agency. The footage exists, yes, but I didn't submit it anywhere. "Then who did?" My mother's voice climbed higher. "Who else would have access? Who else would be vindictive enough to weaponize family conflict into a legal issue?" I genuinely didn't know, but even as confusion swirled, I felt no guilt about the situation. "Did Blair and Owen actually set up unlicensed childcare at your house?" Silence. Then, defensively, "It's temporary. Just for a few weeks until they found better arrangements. The childcare centers had waiting lists. They needed somewhere safe for the children." The pieces clicked into place. After I left, after the confrontations and failed manipulations, my parents had apparently decided to provide the childcare themselves, operating what was essentially an unlicensed daycare facility from their home. And someone, not me, had reported them. "How many children?" I asked quietly. More silence. "Mom, how many children were you watching?" "Just Blair and Owen's 6, she said finally. "And sometimes your cousin Rebecca's 3 when she needed help. And the neighbors asked if we could watch their twins a few afternoons per week because we were already set up for it. But it's not a business, Ivy. We weren't charging anyone. It's just family helping family." 11 children. My mother, who had been horrified by the chaos of 6, had somehow convinced herself that watching 11 children simultaneously wasn't running an unlicensed childcare facility. "That's absolutely a business," I said. "State law is clear. More than 3 unrelated children requires licensing, insurance, safety inspections, the whole regulatory framework. You're operating an illegal facility." My mother's laugh was bitter. "Oh, so now you're the expert on childcare regulations? The same regulations you threw in our faces when we asked you to help?" "I researched them when you demanded I provide free childcare," I corrected. "I knew the legal implications of what you were asking. That's why I sent you documentation outlining the risks. Documentation you apparently never read because you were too focused on being angry about the compensation request." The line went silent except for her sharp breathing. "This is your fault," she said finally. "All of this. If you had just done what families should do, none of this would have happened. Blair and Owen wouldn't be paying thousands for childcare. We wouldn't have tried to help by watching the children ourselves, and we wouldn't be facing fines and legal action because you turned family matters into bureaucratic nightmares." I felt the old guilt rising, the familiar pattern of accepting blame for problems I didn't create. Then I pushed it back down. "No," I said clearly. "This is the consequence of your choices. You demanded I provide services worth thousands of dollars for free. When I declined, you decided to provide those services yourselves without proper licensing or legal compliance. Those were your decisions. The consequences belong to you." My mother's voice dropped to something colder than anger. "You're dead to this family. Do you understand? Dead. Don't come to holidays, don't call, don't expect anything from us ever again." "I haven't expected anything from you for weeks," I replied. "I've been supporting myself just fine without your help. Actually, I've been thriving without the constant emotional manipulation and demands for unpaid labor. So your threat to cut me off is meaningless. You're losing nothing because I'm not coming back." I ended the call before she could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve steady. Within hours, the story had spread through extended family. I received texts and voicemails from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all weighing in with opinions about my behavior, my character, my failure to value family bonds. Uncle Thomas called me selfish. Aunt Jennifer suggested I needed therapy. Cousin Rebecca, whose 3 children had apparently been part of the illegal childcare operation, accused me of sabotaging her working mother arrangements out of jealousy. I blocked them systematically, creating distance from the family narrative that painted me as villain. But one message stopped me. A text from my father sent at 11 at night. The state investigator is coming tomorrow. They're talking about thousands in fines. Your mother has stopped sleeping. Blair is having panic attacks. Owen threatened to sue us for negligence because we agreed to watch his children without proper licensing. This family is being destroyed. I hope whatever point you were making was worth it. I read the message 3 times, waiting for guilt to arrive. Instead, I felt something more complex. A mixture of satisfaction that they were facing consequences, sympathy for the stress they were experiencing, and absolute certainty that none of this was my fault. They had created this situation through their own choices. I had simply refused to be collateral damage in their disaster. The next morning at the coffee shop, Sarah noticed my distraction. Family stuff? She guessed. I nodded, explaining the broad strokes, the childcare demand, my refusal, the apparently illegal operation they had started in my absence, the state investigation they were now facing. She listened without interrupting, then said something that crystallized everything. They're not mad at you for what happened. They're mad that you won't save them from it. She was right. My family's anger wasn't about the state investigation or the fines or the legal complications. It was about my refusal to sacrifice myself to prevent their problems. They had spent my entire life teaching me that my role was to absorb their poor decisions, to cushion their falls, to make their lives easier at cost to my own well-being. By refusing that role, I had committed the unforgivable sin of forcing them to experience natural consequences. That afternoon, during a break from the internship, I received a call from an unknown number. A woman identified herself as Clarissa Mills, investigator with the Department of Labor. I'm calling about the complaint filed regarding childcare operations at 428 Oakwood Drive. I understand you have relevant documentation. My throat tightened. I didn't file the complaint. I'm aware, she said, but the complaint included video evidence that appears to have been recorded by you. I'd like to understand the context of that footage and obtain any additional documentation you might have. I explained carefully the childcare demand, my refusal, the chaotic Monday that I had documented, my departure from the situation entirely. I recorded that footage for my own protection, to document why I was declining to provide the services they wanted. I never intended it for regulatory purposes. But you were aware that operating an unlicensed facility would violate state regulations? She pressed. That's why you sent your family documentation outlining legal requirements and liability concerns? I confirmed this, explaining the detailed contracts and liability waivers I had drafted. Can you provide copies of those documents? She asked. They would be relevant to establishing whether the individuals operating the facility had adequate knowledge of regulatory requirements. I sent everything. The care agreements, the liability waivers, the documentation outlining state regulations, the financial calculations showing the value of services being requested. Clarissa thanked me and said someone would be in touch if they needed additional information. After the call ended, I sat in my parked car, processing what had just happened. The documentary evidence I had created to protect myself was now being used in a state investigation against my family. That evening, Blair called from a number I hadn't blocked. Her voice was raw with crying. They're talking about fines up to $50,000, Ivy. $50,000. Mom and Dad could lose their house. And it's all because you gave the state that video. How could you do this to your own family? I took a slow breath before responding. I didn't give the state anything. Someone else filed that complaint and submitted the footage. I don't know who. You're lying, she sobbed. You're the only one with that video. You did this out of revenge because we wouldn't pay you to babysit. Her characterization was so deliberately wrong that I almost laughed. You expected me to provide 11 hours of daily childcare for 6 kids without compensation, support, or even basic respect for my time. When I declined, you called me selfish. Now you're facing consequences for operating an illegal childcare facility, and somehow that's still my fault? We wouldn't have been watching those kids if you had helped like you were supposed to, she insisted. This whole disaster is because you put your pride ahead of family needs. The manipulation was textbook. Accept blame for others' choices. Prioritize their comfort over your own well-being. View boundaries as betrayal. Blair, I'm going to say this once, clearly. I am not responsible for your childcare challenges. I am not responsible for mom and dad's decision to operate an unlicensed facility. I am not responsible for the fines, the investigation, or any other consequence of choices I didn't make. You all decided that my labor should be free, that my concerns were invalid, and that family meant unlimited access to my time and effort. Those decisions belong to you. She hung up. I blocked the number. And I felt the same strange lightness that followed every conversation where I refused to accept unearned blame. They wanted me to collapse under the weight of their crisis, to rush back apologetically and fix everything. The old Ivy would have done exactly that, would have found some way to take responsibility for problems she didn't create. The new Ivy understood that their emergency was not my obligation. The state investigation proceeded over the following week. I learned through cousin Rebecca's angry voicemail that my parents had received formal notification of regulatory violations, including operating an unlicensed facility, exceeding recommended supervision ratios, inadequate safety protocols, and failure to maintain required insurance. The preliminary fine assessment was $38,000, subject to increase if aggravating factors were discovered. Blair and Owen were named as participating parties since their children were primary recipients of the unlicensed care. The investigation was considering whether their knowing utilization of illegal childcare services constituted contributory negligence. Both were consulting attorneys about potential liability. The family group chat I had been removed from apparently exploded with accusations, blame shifting, and desperation about the financial implications. My father left a voicemail that was different from the others. Quieter, defeated, lacking his usual certainty. I don't know how we got here, Ivy. I keep trying to understand when everything went wrong. Your mother thinks it was when you sent that first email with the compensation request. Blair thinks it was when you refused to help. Owen thinks it was when you moved out. But I think maybe it was earlier. Maybe it was all the times we assumed you would just accept whatever we decided. Maybe it was all the times we didn't see you as having needs that mattered as much as theirs. I don't know if you'll ever forgive us. I don't know if we deserve forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm starting to understand what you were trying to tell us. I listened to the message 3 times. It was the closest thing to acknowledgement I had ever received from him, and it stirred complicated feelings. Part of me wanted to call back, to soften my stance, to offer some kind of reconciliation. But another part, the part that had learned hard lessons about family patterns, recognized that crisis-driven insight wasn't the same as genuine change. My father understood now because he was facing consequences. Whether that understanding would survive the crisis remained unclear. The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from a law firm representing my family. The contents were stunning in their audacity. They were threatening to sue me for damages related to the state investigation, claiming I had intentionally sabotaged their childcare arrangements through malicious reporting and defamation. The letter demanded I retract any statements to state investigators, provide written apology admitting wrongdoing, and contribute financially to resolving the regulatory issues. I sat in my apartment reading the legal threats, feeling something shift decisively inside me. This wasn't my father's momentary clarity or my mother's emotional manipulation. This was calculated legal intimidation, designed to force my compliance through threat of financial ruin. They wanted me to sacrifice myself one more time, to absorb blame for their choices, to rescue them from consequences they had earned. And they were willing to weaponize the legal system to make it happen. I called Diane at the internship program. I need advice about something complicated, I explained. Family situation that's escalated into legal threats. Do you know anyone who might provide consultation? She gave me the name of an attorney who specialized in family law and occasionally did pro bono work for students. I called immediately, scheduling an emergency appointment for that afternoon. The attorney, Patricia Chen, reviewed the letter with practiced efficiency. Then she looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. This is one of the weaker legal threats I've seen, she said. They're claiming you filed a false report, but they can't prove you filed any report at all. They're claiming defamation, but truth is absolute defense. They're threatening damages, but they can't demonstrate you caused the regulatory violations. Their own actions did that. This letter is intimidation, not legitimate legal action. So I should ignore it? I asked. She shook her head slowly. No, you should respond, but not the way they're expecting. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing. We're going to draft a response that outlines exactly what happened, provides documentation of their demands for unpaid labor, and makes clear that any litigation they pursue will result in countersuit for attempted coercion and harassment. We're going to call their bluff. Patricia worked with methodical precision, transforming weeks of documentation into a legal response that left no room for ambiguity. The letter she drafted outlined every detail: the initial childcare demand, my research into state regulations, the contracts I had offered that they refused to review, their explicit acknowledgement that my labor was worth thousands while offering zero compensation, the threatening family meeting, my voluntary departure, and their subsequent decision to operate an unlicensed facility. The key point, Patricia explained as she finalized the document, is establishing that you acted throughout in good faith. You offered legitimate contracts. You warned them about regulatory requirements. You removed yourself from the situation entirely. Their choices after your departure belong solely to them. She included copies of every email, every text message, the video footage with timestamp metadata showing it was recorded during my brief involvement, and the detailed care agreements I had drafted that outlined legal compliance requirements. The letter concluded with a paragraph Patricia delivered with particular satisfaction. Any attempt to pursue legal action against Ms. Ivy Parker will be met with counterclaim for intentional infliction of emotional distress, attempted coercion, and harassment. Furthermore, such action would require your clients to testify under oath about their demands for unpaid labor, their refusal to provide fair compensation, and their decision to operate an unlicensed childcare facility despite explicit warnings about regulatory requirements. We strongly advise against this course of action. Patricia sent the response via certified mail and electronic delivery, ensuring immediate receipt. Now we wait, she said. Most likely their attorney will read this, realize they have no case, and advise them to drop it. But be prepared for escalation. People who are used to getting their way don't respond well to having their tactics called out explicitly. She was prophetic. The escalation arrived 36 hours later. My mother appeared at the coffee shop during closing time, when I was alone wiping down tables and preparing for the next morning's shift. She must have been waiting outside, watching through the windows for my coworkers to leave. The moment Sarah departed, my mother entered, moving quickly to the door and flipping the sign to closed before I could react. "We need to talk," she announced, her voice carrying an edge I had never heard before. "I'm working," I said carefully, reaching for my phone. "If you want to discuss anything, it should go through attorneys." She laughed, the sound brittle and slightly unhinged. "Attorneys? Our daughter is communicating through attorneys now. Do you know what this family has become because of you? Your sister is on anxiety medication. Your brother's marriage is strained because of financial stress. Your father barely sleeps, and I—" Her voice cracked. "I have spent 30 years building a reputation in this community, and now people whisper when I walk past." I felt unexpected sympathy mixed with firm resolve. "I'm sorry you're experiencing stress, but the consequences you're facing aren't because of me. They're because you chose to demand free labor, then operate an illegal business when I declined." My mother stepped closer, her hands clenched. "You had a choice. You could have helped. You could have been part of this family. Instead, you chose to destroy us." "I chose to value myself," I corrected quietly. "For the first time in my life, I chose to believe that my time, my labor, my future mattered as much as everyone else's comfort. If that destroyed your version of family, then that version needed to be destroyed." Her hand moved so quickly I barely registered it, a slap that connected with my cheek hard enough to snap my head sideways. Pain bloomed sharp and immediate. I staggered back, hand rising to my face in shocked reflex. "You ungrateful, selfish, hateful girl," she hissed, moving toward me again. After everything we sacrificed. After everything we gave you. I grabbed my phone, finger already moving toward the emergency call button. But my mother was faster than I expected. She snatched the phone from my hand and threw it across the room where it shattered against the display case. Glass exploded, coffee mugs crashing to the floor in a symphony of destruction. The security camera mounted in the corner captured everything. I remembered Sarah mentioning it during training, explaining how footage was automatically uploaded to cloud storage in real time. Whatever happened next would be documented. "You're going to fix this," my mother continued, her voice rising. "You're going to call that investigator and tell her you lied. Tell her we weren't running a business, that you exaggerated everything out of spite. You're going to withdraw whatever statements you made." "I didn't file the complaint," I said, backing away as she advanced. "I've told you repeatedly. Someone else reported you. I don't know who." She grabbed a coffee pot from the warming station, and for a horrifying moment I thought she might throw it at me. Instead, she held it, her hand shaking. "Then you're going to find out who did. You're going to fix this. Because if you don't, if our family loses everything because of you, I will make sure you pay for it. Do you understand?" The threat hung between us, unmistakable in its implications. I had backed into the corner by the sink, trapped with nowhere to retreat. My mother advanced until she was inches away, coffee pot still raised. "Answer me, Ivy. Do you understand?" I understood that I was genuinely afraid of my own mother for the first time in my life. Understood that her desperation had transformed into something dangerous. The door chimed, startling us both. Sarah stood in the entrance, her keys still in hand, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she assessed the scene. "Ivy, is everything okay?" Her gaze moved to my reddening cheek, the broken phone, the shattered display case, my mother's raised arm with the coffee pot. "Ma'am, I need you to put that down and step away from my employee." My mother turned, and for a moment I saw calculation cross her features, wondering if she could talk her way out, spin some story that would explain away the obvious violence of the situation. Then something crumbled in her expression, and she set down the coffee pot with shaking hands. "This is between me and my daughter. Family business. Family business that involves assault in my establishment," Sarah countered, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." My mother's face paled. "That's not necessary. We were just talking. It got emotional. Ivy understands. Don't you, sweetheart? Tell her this is just a misunderstanding." She looked at me with desperate pleading, silently begging me to cover for her one more time, to absorb the blame, to protect her from consequences. "Call them," I said to Sarah, my voice steadier than I felt. "Please call the police." The betrayal that crossed my mother's face was almost painful to witness. "You would do that? Have your own mother arrested?" I met her eyes directly. "You just assaulted me, destroyed property, and threatened me. Yes, I will absolutely press charges." The police arrived within minutes. Tyler, ironically, was one of the responding officers. His expression shifted from professional neutrality to concerned recognition when he saw me, the red handprint on my face, the shattered phone and broken display case. Sarah provided a calm statement about what she had witnessed. I explained the escalating conflict, the legal threats, tonight's confrontation. My mother alternated between tearful apologies and angry accusations, her emotional state deteriorating visibly. They arrested her for assault and destruction of property. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with an expression I couldn't read: hatred, grief, disbelief, perhaps all three simultaneously. "Your father will never forgive you for this," she said as her parting shot. Tyler stayed behind to complete the report, his voice gentle as he documented my statement. "I'm sorry you're going through this," he said quietly. "Family situations like this are always complicated." "It's not complicated," I replied. "It's actually very simple. They wanted free labor. I declined. Everything that happened after that was their choice, not mine." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, you're right. And you're handling it better than most people would." He gave me the case number and explained that I would receive a summons for court proceedings. Then he looked around at the destroyed coffee shop. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Sarah had already called the owner about the damage, arranging for emergency repairs and assuring me repeatedly that I wasn't responsible for the cost. I declined Tyler's ride offer, choosing instead to walk home through the quiet streets, needing the movement and solitude to process what had happened. The night air was cool against my burning cheek, the physical pain sharp enough to cut through emotional numbness. At my apartment, Jenna took one look at my face and pulled me inside. Marcus emerged from his room, concern evident, and they listened while I explained in flat, exhausted sentences what had happened. "You're pressing charges?" Jenna confirmed. I nodded. She hugged me tightly. "Good. You're doing the right thing. Family doesn't mean accepting abuse." I spent the night documenting everything in meticulous detail while memories were fresh. The confrontation, the assault, the threats, every word I could recall. Patricia had advised me to maintain careful records, and tonight's events provided disturbing evidence of escalation. I photographed my injured cheek from multiple angles, documented the shattered phone, wrote out timeline and dialogue with timestamp precision. The clinical exercise helped contain the emotional overwhelm threatening to break through my careful control. The consequences spread through my family like wildfire through dry brush. Blair called early the next morning, her voice tight with fury. "You had Mom arrested? Actually arrested? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I kept my voice level. "She assaulted me, destroyed property, and made threats. Those are crimes. Yes, I'm pressing charges." "She was upset," Blair shouted. "Our family is falling apart and you keep making everything worse. First the childcare disaster, then the state investigation, now this? When does it end, Ivy?" I let the question hang for a moment before answering. "It ends when you all accept that your problems aren't my responsibility. It ends when you stop expecting me to sacrifice myself to make your lives easier. It ends when you acknowledge that I have value beyond being your convenient scapegoat." Owen sent an email rather than calling, probably to avoid direct confrontation. The message outlined plans for an emergency family intervention, suggesting I needed professional help to address my destructive behavior patterns. The irony of my abuser suggesting I needed therapy was almost amusing. I forwarded the email to Patricia with a brief note. Further evidence of ongoing harassment. The court proceedings for my mother's assault charge were scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, a restraining order was issued keeping her at least 500 feet from me at all times. Similar orders were filed against Blair and Owen after documented harassment continued. My parents' attorney contacted Patricia requesting a meeting to resolve these unfortunate situations without further legal action. Patricia's response was brief. Recommended resolution. Your clients accept responsibility for their actions and cease all contact with my client. Non-negotiable. The state investigation into the unlicensed childcare operation concluded with findings that confirmed everything I had documented. The facility had operated in violation of multiple regulations, posed documented safety risks, and had done so despite explicit knowledge of legal requirements. The final fine assessment was $42,000, split between my parents as facility operators and my siblings as knowing participants. Additionally, all 4 were barred from operating any childcare services for 5 years and placed on a registry that would appear in background checks. The financial devastation was exactly what they had tried to force me to prevent. My parents took out a second mortgage on their house. Blair and Owen liquidated retirement savings to pay their portions. The licensed childcare facilities they now used cost exactly what they would have cost all along: expensive but legal, safe, professionally operated. They were paying market rate for services they had expected to receive from me for free, plus substantial penalties for attempting to circumvent the system. But the most significant consequence wasn't financial. The family reputation my mother had spent 30 years cultivating crumbled under the weight of public knowledge about the assault, the illegal operation, the documented exploitation of their youngest daughter. Their church community distanced itself. Professional associations questioned their ethics. Extended family members who had initially supported them began asking uncomfortable questions about what had really happened. My father's message acknowledging his role in the family dysfunction had proven hollow. Instead of genuine change, he had returned to the familiar pattern of enabling my mother's behavior and expecting me to accommodate their dysfunction. His testimony during the assault trial attempted to minimize what had happened, suggesting I had provoked my mother through my increasingly hostile behavior toward the family. The judge was not impressed. 6 weeks after my mother's arrest, I sat in Patricia's office reviewing the final legal settlements. All charges against me had been dropped. There had never been legitimate grounds, as she had predicted. My mother had pleaded guilty to assault and received probation, mandatory anger management, and permanent restraining order from me. The state fines were final. The family was permanently fractured along fault lines that had always existed, but were now exposed beyond repair. "How are you feeling?" Patricia asked as I signed the last documents. I considered the question carefully. Vindicated, sad, relieved, angry that it took all this to establish basic boundaries. Grateful I found the courage to stop accepting abuse disguised as family loyalty. She nodded, understanding evident in her expression. "You know that some people will always believe you should have handled this differently. That you should have tried harder to preserve family relationships. Those people weren't being exploited," I replied. They weren't being asked to provide $59,000 in free labor. They weren't being treated as worthless except for what they could provide others. Their opinions don't matter because they weren't living my reality. Patricia smiled. "Exactly right. You chose yourself. That's not selfish. That's survival." The fall semester started with an odd sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. Moving through campus without the weight of family obligation felt like walking after removing a heavy backpack I had carried so long I had forgotten it was there. The internship coordinator position had indeed extended into the school year, 15 hours weekly that complemented my course schedule perfectly. The coffee shop kept me on for weekend morning shifts, enough to maintain income without overwhelming my academic commitments. Diane called me into her office during the second week of classes. "The internship program has funding for a full-time coordinator starting next summer," she explained. "The position includes benefits, professional development opportunities, and potential path to permanent staff role after graduation. I'd like you to apply." I accepted immediately, recognizing the opportunity for what it was: career foundation built on competence and merit, rather than family connection or obligation. My parents made one final attempt at reconciliation, sort of. My father appeared at campus during my lunch break, waiting near the student center until I emerged. He looked older than I remembered, the stress of recent months evident in new lines around his eyes and the gray threading through his hair. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice tired. "Just 5 minutes." We sat at an outdoor table, sufficient distance between us that I could leave easily if needed. He didn't try to close the gap. "Your mother wants me to apologize on her behalf," he began. "She's not allowed to contact you directly, so she asked me to tell you she's sorry for how things escalated." I waited, saying nothing. He continued. "The whole situation got out of control. Things were said and done that shouldn't have happened. We just want to move past it." "Move past it," I repeated softly. "Without acknowledging what actually happened? Without recognizing that you all demanded free labor worth thousands, then punished me for declining? Without accepting that every consequence you faced resulted from your own choices?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We see it differently. But maybe we can agree to disagree and try to rebuild some kind of relationship?" I shook my head slowly. "You don't see it differently. You see it exactly the same way I do. You just think your perspective justified exploiting me. The difference is I no longer care whether you think you were justified. Your opinion of my choices stopped mattering when you made it clear my well-being was irrelevant to you." His face hardened. "So that's it? You're just cutting off your entire family? Throwing away decades of relationships?" "I'm establishing that I have value beyond what I can provide for others," I corrected. "If that means losing relationships that were conditional on my exploitation, then those relationships weren't worth keeping." He stood, disappointment and frustration warring in his expression. "Your mother was right. You've become cold, calculating. This isn't the daughter we raised." "No," I agreed. "The daughter you raised would have destroyed herself trying to meet impossible expectations. I'm something better. Someone who knows her worth and won't accept less than she deserves." He walked away without responding, and I felt nothing but relief at his departure. The door was closed, locked, and I had no intention of opening it again. Blair reached out exactly once, via a mutual friend's Facebook message forwarding. The note was brief. "The kids ask about you sometimes. I tell them you moved away. It seemed kinder than explaining you abandoned them." I didn't respond, but the manipulation was clear, another attempt to make me feel guilty for their problems. The children were fine. They had professional childcare, stable routines, parents who were learning to actually parent. My absence wasn't abandonment. It was the absence of free labor they had never deserved. 3 months into the semester, I received an unexpected email from Clarissa Mills, the state investigator. "I wanted to follow up about the child care facility case," she wrote. "As you know, the investigation concluded with significant findings and penalties. What you may not know is that your documentation was crucial to understanding the full scope of regulatory violations. Your willingness to provide evidence, despite personal cost, likely prevented other children from being placed in unsafe situations." She continued, "I also wanted to inform you that your initial care agreements, the ones you drafted for your family, were some of the most thorough examples of childcare contracts I've reviewed. If you're interested in child welfare policy or advocacy work, I'd be happy to discuss opportunities within the department." I read the email 3 times, processing the unexpected validation. The documents I had created to protect myself had apparently impressed a professional investigator enough to prompt career guidance. I met with Clarissa the following week. She explained that the state was developing new regulations around informal childcare arrangements, particularly those that fell into legal gray areas. "We need people who understand both the family dynamics and the regulatory framework," she said. "Your situation highlighted gaps in our enforcement and education approach. You could help us address those gaps." The work she described aligned perfectly with my business and psychology background: policy development, family education programs, enforcement guidelines that balanced safety with family autonomy. "I'm finishing my undergraduate degree," I told her, "but I'm interested in this work long term. How would I position myself for these roles?" She provided contact information for graduate programs, professional organizations, and suggested I consider public policy or social work for advanced degrees. Driving back to campus, I reflected on the strange trajectory of the past months. What had started as family conflict over childcare expectations had transformed into potential career direction, professional network, and clarity about my values that I had never possessed before. The costs had been high: family relationships destroyed, emotional trauma, legal battles. But the gains were equally significant: self-respect, financial independence, professional opportunities built on merit rather than obligation. Winter break approached with none of the usual anxiety about family gatherings. I had accepted a paid position house sitting for one of my professors, 3 weeks in a quiet neighborhood with reliable Wi-Fi and no expectations beyond feeding 2 cats and collecting mail. Jenna and Marcus were spending holidays with their families, so the apartment would have been lonely anyway. This arrangement provided peace, solitude, and continued income. On Christmas morning, I woke up in the professor's guest room and made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchen. My phone had 0 family messages, 0 guilt trips about missing celebrations, 0 manipulation disguised as holiday greetings. The silence was peaceful rather than sad. I video called with the few extended family members who had maintained contact despite the family narrative. My father's sister, who had experienced similar exploitation in her own family and understood my choices. A cousin who had been quietly supportive throughout. The coffee shop owner, grateful for my continued employment after the assault incident, gave me a generous holiday bonus and raised my hourly rate. "You handled an impossible situation with grace," she said. "That kind of professionalism is rare." The internship program sent a gift card and note thanking me for exceeding expectations. Small gestures from people who valued my work, recognized my contributions, treated me as having inherent worth. Spring semester brought new challenges: heavier course load, thesis preparation, graduate school applications. But managing academic pressure while working 2 jobs felt sustainable, in ways that family obligations never had. The difference was simple. My employers valued my labor. My professors valued my mind. My friends valued my presence. None of them believed their needs entitled them to unlimited access to my time, energy, or resources. I ran into Owen unexpectedly at a coffee shop near campus. Not my workplace, just a place I had stopped between classes. He was meeting someone for business, looked as polished and confident as ever. We made eye contact across the room. His expression hardened briefly before he deliberately turned away, pretending not to recognize me. The dismissal might have hurt once. Now it simply confirmed that cutting ties had been exactly right. Blair sent a certified letter to my campus address in March, her attorney's letterhead prominent on the envelope. My stomach dropped, anticipating new legal threats. Instead, the letter contained divorce documents. She and her husband were separating, and she wanted me to know that financial stress from the childcare situation had contributed to irreconcilable differences. The implication was clear. Another problem for me to feel guilty about. I filed the letter with Patricia's office and sent a brief response. I'm sorry your marriage is ending. However, the financial stress you reference resulted from choices you and Owen made, demanding free labor, operating an illegal facility, facing appropriate legal consequences. Those choices belong to you. I wish you well in your future, but I'm not responsible for the outcomes of your decisions. Graduation approached with mounting excitement. I would be walking across that stage with a 3.9 GPA, double major completion, job offer already accepted for summer coordinator role, and acceptance to graduate programs at 3 excellent schools. Everything I had achieved was mine, earned through my work, my discipline, my refusal to sacrifice my potential for others' convenience. No one could claim credit. No one could suggest they had made it possible. This success belonged entirely to me. The ceremony was beautiful. Spring sunshine, inspirational speeches, the satisfying weight of the diploma in my hand. My parents were not there. My siblings were not there. And their absence didn't diminish the moment in any way. Instead, the people who attended, Diane, Patricia, Sarah, Tyler, Jenna, Marcus, professors who had mentored me, co-workers who had supported me, represented the family I had chosen and built through mutual respect and genuine care. At the graduation reception afterward, Diane pulled me aside. I know this year has been difficult for you. Family situations, legal challenges, everything you've navigated while maintaining exceptional academic performance. I want you to know that you're exactly the kind of person we want in leadership roles. Someone who knows her worth, stands firm on principles, and doesn't accept exploitation as normal. Her words settled something that had been unsettled. That evening, sitting on my apartment balcony with Jenna and Marcus, drinking cheap champagne to celebrate graduation, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. Not the temporary satisfaction of surviving another crisis, but deep contentment about the life I had built. What's next? Marcus asked. Graduate school in the fall, summer coordinator job. Eventually, maybe that policy work with the State Department. Whatever I choose, it will be mine. Jenna raised her glass. To Ivy, who taught us all that family is what you create, not what you're assigned. We clinked glasses, and I felt the truth of her words. The family I had been born into had demanded my diminishment as the price of belonging. The family I had chosen celebrated my growth. The difference was everything. 6 months after graduation, working full-time in the coordinator role while starting evening graduate classes, I received a LinkedIn message from someone named Anonymous Advocate. The message was brief. I was the one who filed the state complaint about the unlicensed childcare facility. I'm a social worker who had professional dealings with your family and recognized the patterns of exploitation and unsafe practices. I wanted you to know that your documentation made the case possible. You saved children from potential harm, even though I know that wasn't your intention. Thank you for having the courage to document reality. I stared at the message, processing the revelation. Some random social worker who had witnessed my family's behavior had been moved to take action, using the evidence I had created for self-pee protection to prevent harm to others. The family narrative had painted me as vindictive saboteur who had maliciously destroyed them. Reality was that I had simply documented truth, and someone else had recognized that truth needed official attention. I never responded to the message. There was nothing to say. But knowing that the consequences my family faced had resulted from multiple people recognizing their behavior as problematic, not just me being difficult, validated everything I had experienced. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't selfish. I was someone who had finally refused to enable dysfunction, and the world had agreed that dysfunction needed to stop. A year after the initial childcare conflict, I was thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible during those dark summer weeks. Graduate program going well. Professional network expanding. Financial stability achieved through my own work. Relationships built on mutual respect and reciprocity. The family who had expected my sacrifice and received my refusal had faded into background noise. Their occasional attempts at contact, blocked efficiently and forgotten quickly. I kept one photograph from my childhood. The last picture taken before my father died, before everything changed. Young Ivy smiled up at the camera, unaware of the years of exploitation ahead, the lessons she would learn about worth and boundaries and choosing yourself. I kept the photo not as nostalgia, but as reminder. That girl had deserved better. This woman had finally given it to her. The definition of success I had been taught, family harmony at any cost, selfless service, accepting scraps gratefully, had been replaced with something more substantial. Success was knowing your value. Success was enforcing boundaries. Success was building a life where your worth was recognized and your contributions compensated fairly. Success was choosing yourself repeatedly until that choice became natural rather than revolutionary. My family had demanded I sacrifice everything for their convenience, had punished my refusal, had faced consequences for their own choices, and had never once acknowledged their role in the disaster they created. I had survived their exploitation, documented their abuse, protected myself legally and financially, and built something better from the wreckage. They ended diminished and facing penalties. I ended thriving and free. The scales had balanced exactly as they should.